Mark bought the land because he wanted quiet. For years, he worked long hours in a small repair shop in town. He fixed engines, changed tires, and helped people who were stuck on the road. The work was honest, but it was loud and stressful. When he finally saved enough, he sold the shop and bought a piece of land outside town. It was not fancy, but it was his. There were tall trees, wide open space, and clean air. No close neighbors. No city noise. Just peace. Mark planned to build a simple home one day. Nothing big. A small house with a porch, maybe a garden, maybe a workshop where he could work in his own way. He was not in a hurry. He just enjoyed knowing the land was there, waiting for him. For 7 years, nothing changed. Then one morning, Mark noticed something strange. He was walking near the far side of his property when he saw fresh tire tracks in the soil. That was unusual. Mark did not invite anyone. He did not allow people to drive into his land. He followed the tracks, moving slowly, scanning the ground. A few minutes later, he stopped. A structure was standing on his land. It was not a small thing. Wooden frames rose into the air like the start of a house. Some boards were new, light in color, and clean. A square base of fresh cement covered part of the ground. A stack of materials sat nearby, wrapped in plastic. Tools were placed on a table, as if workers would return any moment. Mark felt confused at first, then angry. He stepped closer and saw bright tape tied around a few posts. A sign was nailed to a stake. The sign had bold writing and a logo. It looked official, like something a business or a community group would use. Mark read it carefully. It showed the name of a neighborhood group and listed rules about building styles, roof colors, and approved designs. The word HOA appeared near the top, along with a title that sounded serious and powerful. Mark stared at it for a long moment. He knew the neighborhood across the road had some kind of homeowners group. People there had neat lawns and matching fences. They liked rules. Mark stayed away from them. His land was outside their area. He did not sign any agreement. He did not join their group. He did not attend any meetings. No one had ever asked him to. So why was there a sign on his land? Mark pulled out his phone and opened the land map he had saved. He zoomed in and checked the boundary lines. He also checked the physical markers on the ground. The old metal stakes were still there, just like before. The structure was clearly inside his property line. Mark took pictures of everything. He photographed the wood frames, the cement base, the materials, the sign, and the tire tracks. He also recorded a short video, walking around the site and showing the boundary marker in the frame. He wanted proof. If this became a legal issue, he wanted to be ready. That afternoon, Mark drove to the town office and asked about building permits. The worker behind the desk searched the records. After a few minutes, she shook her head. "There is no permit for construction at your land address," she said. Mark asked if any group had permission to build on his land. The worker looked at him like the question was strange. "Only the landowner can approve that," she said. "If you did not apply, it is not approved." Mark left the office with a tight feeling in his chest. He returned home and walked the land again. He noticed footprints and empty water bottles in the grass. Someone had been there recently. The idea made him feel uncomfortable. His land was his safe place. Now it felt like someone had entered his space without permission and acted like they belonged there. That evening, a clean truck pulled up near Mark's gate. A man stepped out wearing a tucked-in shirt and neat shoes. He looked like someone who enjoyed being in charge. He carried a folder in one hand and a confident smile on his face. He introduced himself as Paul. Paul said he represented the neighborhood group. Mark stayed calm and asked why Paul was on his land. Paul smiled wider. "We are improving the area," he said. "The new structure is part of our plan to keep property values strong. We approved it." Mark blinked. "You approved something on my land?" Paul nodded like it was normal. This area falls under our influence. It is close enough to the community. Mark felt his patience drop. Influence is not ownership, he said. This land is not part of your group. I did not sign anything with you. Paul opened his folder and showed papers. They had stamps, signatures, and official-looking words. Paul pointed to a map. Mark leaned forward and looked closely. The map showed lines, but the lines were not accurate. The property shapes looked wrong. The road was drawn in the wrong place. Mark realized something important. Paul did not have real authority. He had papers, but the papers did not match reality. Mark said, "This map is incorrect. The structure is on my land. You have no right to build here." Paul's smile faded for a second, then returned. "Mistakes happen," Paul said. "But the project is already started. It would be easier for you to cooperate." Mark crossed his arms. "No," he said. "It will be removed." Paul's eyes narrowed. "That would be a serious action," he said. "You could face consequences." Mark looked him straight in the face. "The only consequence is you should not build on land you do not own." Paul took a slow breath, then stepped back. "We will handle this," he said. He climbed into his truck and drove away without another word. For the first time since buying the land, Mark did not sleep well. He kept thinking about the structure. Who decided to do this? How many people were involved? Why did they believe they could claim his land? Was this a mistake or something planned? The next day, Mark called a local land surveyor. A woman named Nora arrived with equipment and a calm, professional attitude. She measured the area, checked the markers, and reviewed Mark's documents. After a few hours, she confirmed what Mark already knew. "The structure is fully on your property," Nora said. "Not even close to the line. Whoever did this either made a careless mistake or they assumed you would not fight back." Mark asked if he could remove it. Nora nodded. "It is your land," she said. "But document everything. Take photos from every angle. Keep your survey report. If they try to claim something later, you will need proof." Mark did not waste time. He hired a licensed crew that handled unauthorized construction removals. They arrived 2 days later with trucks and tools. The crew leader walked the site with Mark and looked at the survey report. "This does not belong here," the leader said. "We can remove it cleanly. No drama." Mark stood at a distance while the crew worked. Boards came down one by one. Materials were loaded into trucks. The cement base was broken into pieces and hauled away. The ground was leveled. The area was left clean, almost like nothing had ever happened. By sunset, the structure was gone. Mark felt relief. He thought it was over. The next morning, he walked to his gate and froze. A formal letter was taped to the wood. The paper was crisp. The writing was sharp. The letter claimed that Mark had destroyed a valuable community project. It accused him of causing financial damage. It demanded payment. The number at the bottom was so large it did not feel real. It was in the millions. Mark read it twice, slowly. Then he looked down at the signature. It was signed by the same man. Mark stood at the gate holding the letter for a long time. The morning air was cool, but his hands felt warm. He read the letter again, slowly, word by word. The language was formal and heavy. It spoke of damages, loss, and responsibility. It claimed the structure was part of a planned community project. It said Mark acted without warning. It demanded payment that was larger than anything Mark had ever earned in his life. Millions. Mark folded the letter and placed it in his pocket. He did not panic. Years of running a repair shop taught him one thing. Panic never fixed anything. He took a deep breath and walked back to his house. Inside, Mark sat at the kitchen table and spread out everything he had. Land papers, photos, videos, the survey report from Nora, the town office note that confirmed there was no permit. He organized them carefully, stacking each item in order. He knew one thing clearly. He was not wrong. Still, the letter bothered him. It was not just a threat. It was written with confidence, like the sender truly believed they could win. That confidence worried Mark more than anger would have. That afternoon, another truck arrived. This time, it was not Paul alone. Two people stepped out. A man and a woman, both dressed neatly. They carried folders and wore calm faces. They did not smile. They walked to the gate and waited. Mark stepped outside and kept the gate closed between them. The woman spoke first. Her name was Linda. She said she represented the neighborhood group along with Paul. She said they wanted to resolve the issue peacefully. Mark listened without interrupting. Linda explained that the group had invested money into the structure. She said it was planned as a small office for community use. She said the mistake about the land boundary was unfortunate, but claimed Mark acted too quickly by removing it. Mark replied in a steady voice, "You built without permission, on land you do not own. That is not a mistake. That is a decision." The man beside Linda cleared his throat. His name was Greg. He said the group believed Mark's land was included in a future expansion area. He said discussions had taken place years ago. Mark shook his head. "Discussions are not agreements," he said. "I was never contacted. I never signed anything." Linda tried a different approach. She said legal action would be stressful and expensive. She suggested Mark could settle the issue by paying a reduced amount. She said it would be easier for everyone. Mark felt his patience tested. "I will not pay for something I did not approve," he said. "You should not threaten people when you are in the wrong." Greg's face tightened. "You should be careful," he said. "Our group has strong legal support." Mark looked at both of them. "Then you should have checked the land records before building," he said. Linda closed her folder slowly. "We will be in touch," she said. They walked away. That night, Mark called a lawyer. Her name was Helen. She specialized in land disputes. Mark explained everything from the beginning. He emailed her all the documents and photos. Helen reviewed them carefully. The next day, she called back. "You did the right thing by documenting everything," she said. "From what I see, they have no legal claim. No permit. No agreement. No ownership. Their demand has no foundation." Mark felt a small weight lift from his chest. Helen warned him, however, that groups like this often rely on pressure. "They assume people will give in to fear," she said. "They may try to intimidate you with letters or public claims." Mark asked what he should do next. "Do nothing without legal advice," Helen said. "If they contact you again, direct them to me." The neighborhood group did not stay quiet. Within days, rumors started to spread in town. Mark noticed people looking at him differently at the grocery store. A man he barely knew asked if it was true that Mark destroyed community property. A woman at the fuel station whispered to someone while pointing in his direction. Mark realized the group was telling their version of the story. They painted him as stubborn and selfish. They claimed he acted out of anger. They said the structure was meant to benefit everyone. Mark did not respond publicly. Instead, Helen sent a formal letter on his behalf. The letter explained the facts clearly. It stated that the structure was illegal. It included proof of ownership and lack of permit. It demanded the neighborhood group stop all harassment and false claims. A week passed. Then another letter arrived. This one was more aggressive. It accused Mark of financial harm again. It listed costs and imaginary losses. It warned of a lawsuit if payment was not made. Mark handed the letter to Helen. Helen smiled calmly. "They are digging themselves deeper," she said. She filed a response. This time, it included a warning of counteraction if the group continued. It also requested proof of their claimed authority and expenses. The response changed things. Paul showed up again, alone. He stood at the gate, looking less confident than before. "I think we got off on the wrong foot," Paul said. Mark crossed his arms. "You tried to scare me into paying millions," he said. "That is not a misunderstanding." Paul sighed. He said the group leaders were upset. He said money had been spent. He said people expected results. Mark replied, "Your expectations do not control my land." Paul lowered his voice. "You know how these groups work," he said. "They do not like losing." Mark leaned closer to the gate. "Then maybe they should learn not to take what is not theirs." Paul left without another threat. Days later, Mark received notice that the neighborhood group officially filed a lawsuit. They claimed ownership influence. They claimed damages. They demanded payment again. Mark felt calm. He trusted the facts. Helen prepared the case carefully. She gathered all evidence. She requested official records. She highlighted the lack of permits and agreements. As the court date approached, something unexpected happened. The town office contacted Helen. They informed her that multiple complaints had been filed against the neighborhood group in the past. Similar issues. Similar behavior. Other landowners. Other boundary problems. This was not the first time. Mark learned that the group had a pattern. They pushed limits. They assumed silence meant permission. They relied on fear and confusion. This time, they had chosen the wrong person. Mark stood on his land one evening, looking at the cleared ground where the structure once stood. The trees swayed gently. The space felt peaceful again. But he knew the real fight was just beginning. And this time, it would not be decided at the gate. It would be decided in court. Mark did not like court. He was a simple man. He liked clear rules and honest work. He believed if someone owned something, it was theirs. If someone made a mistake, they should admit it and fix it. But now the situation had moved into a world of papers, claims, and legal language. It felt like stepping into a storm made of words. Helen guided him through everything. She explained what would happen and what the neighborhood group might try next. She told Mark to stay calm and focus on facts. She said truth matters, but in court, truth must be proven with records. Mark understood that. The first court meeting was not the final trial. It was an early hearing where both sides presented basic information. Mark arrived wearing clean clothes and a steady face. Helen carried a thick folder. Paul arrived too, wearing a suit this time. He came with a lawyer named Dennis, a man with sharp eyes and a voice that sounded like he enjoyed arguments. Inside the courtroom, the air felt cold. Mark sat quietly while Helen spoke for him. She explained that Mark owned the land. She presented the survey report from Nora. She showed the town record proving there was no permit. She stated Mark removed an unapproved structure from his own land. Dennis responded with confidence. He claimed the neighborhood group acted in good faith. He said they believed the land was part of a future community plan. He said Mark had caused major financial harm by removing a project that was meant for community benefit. The judge listened without showing emotion. After the short hearing, the judge gave a clear order. Both sides had to provide full documents and evidence within a set period. The judge also warned both sides to avoid public conflict. Mark felt relief after hearing that. He believed once all facts were visible, the case would end quickly. But Helen warned him not to relax too soon. They may try pressure in other ways, she said. Not everything happens inside court. Helen was right. A few days later, Mark noticed a car parked across the road from his land. It sat there for a long time. The windows were dark. When Mark walked outside, the car drove away slowly. The next morning, Mark found new signs placed near the road. They were placed just outside his gate, on public ground. The signs said the area was part of the neighborhood group's plan zone. The words were carefully chosen. They did not directly claim ownership, but they suggested authority. It made Mark feel angry. Not because he was scared, but because it was a clear attempt to confuse people. Helen advised him to take photos but not remove the signs. Let them build their own case against themselves, she said. Mark followed her advice. Then something even stranger happened. One afternoon, Mark received a polite letter from the town office. It said there was a complaint about unsafe land conditions and possible rule violations. It asked him to schedule an inspection. Mark felt surprised. His land was clean. There was no trash. No unsafe equipment. Nothing unusual. Helen read the letter and nodded. This is a common tactic, she said. They file complaints to create stress. Do not worry. We will handle it properly. The inspector arrived 2 days later. His name was Sam. He was calm and fair. He walked the property with Mark, checked the area where the structure had been, and looked at the boundary markers. Mark showed him the survey report. Sam seemed serious as he reviewed it. After the inspection, Sam said something that gave Mark hope. I have heard of this group before, Sam said quietly. They cause trouble. Sam wrote a simple report stating Mark's land was fine. No violations. No issues. When Mark shared this with Helen, she smiled. It helps, she said. It shows the complaint was not based on reality. As the weeks passed, more information came out. Helen requested documents from the neighborhood group. She asked for proof of permits, proof of land authority, and proof of planning approval. She also demanded records of the claimed costs and damages. The group responded slowly and with incomplete files. Some papers were missing. Some numbers did not match. Some claims had no receipts at all. Helen also discovered something important. The neighborhood group was not just a casual group of residents. It was connected to a small private company that handled fees and projects. That company had the same address as Paul's business office. Mark listened as Helen explained it. So they build projects, collect money, and control rules, Mark said. And Paul is involved. Helen nodded. That is what it looks like, she said. And when they push into areas outside their authority, they gain more influence. Mark felt a cold feeling in his stomach. He realized this was not only about a mistaken boundary. It was about power. The group wanted to show they could act like owners, even where they were not. And if Mark paid, it would become a victory for them. It would encourage them to do it again to someone else. Mark told Helen he wanted to fight fully. Helen said, "Good. Because we have something else now." She showed him a set of emails she received through legal requests. The emails were between Paul and other leaders. One message said they should move fast before Mark made problems. Another suggested the boundary was unclear enough to take advantage. Mark stared at the screen. They knew. They knew the land was not theirs, or at least they knew it was risky. And they did it anyway. Helen said, "This is strong evidence. It shows intent." Mark did not smile, but his eyes became steady. For the first time, he felt the case turning in his favor. But the neighborhood group made one final move before the next hearing. They offered a settlement. The amount was lower than before, but still huge. They also demanded Mark sign an agreement allowing the group some control over his property edge in the future. The offer was written like a friendly solution, but Mark could see the trap. Helen told him not to accept. "If you sign, you give them a door into your land," she said. "And they will keep pushing." Mark refused the settlement. 2 days later, he received an invite from a local community meeting. It was hosted by the neighborhood group. The message said they wanted to hear concerns from everyone, including Mark. Mark did not trust it. Still, Helen suggested he attend, but only with calm and only to observe. The meeting took place in a small hall. People sat in rows. A table was set at the front. Paul was there, along with Linda and Greg. They looked prepared, like they planned to perform. When Mark entered, heads turned. Paul began speaking about community goals and protecting the area. He spoke in a smooth voice. He described Mark as someone who acted suddenly and hurt the community. Mark stayed silent. Then a woman in the crowd stood up and asked a simple question. "Why did you build on land you do not own?" she asked. The room became quiet. Paul hesitated. He tried to answer carefully, but his words did not sound strong. He spoke about maps and misunderstandings, but people did not look convinced. Then another person stood up. An older man named Rafi said, "This is not the first time you pushed into someone else's space." More voices followed. People began sharing small stories, complaints, pressure, fines that felt unfair, rules that changed suddenly, fees that did not make sense. Mark realized something powerful. The group had enemies, even inside its own community. Paul tried to regain control, but the mood had shifted. People were no longer listening with trust. Mark left the meeting without speaking. Outside, he stood under the night sky and felt something he had not felt in weeks. Hope. The next hearing was coming. And now, Mark was not alone. The next court date arrived faster than Mark expected. This time, the room was more crowded. A few people from town sat on the benches. Some were curious. Some looked serious. Mark noticed a few familiar faces from the community meeting. They nodded at him quietly. It gave him strength. Helen sat beside Mark with her files neatly arranged. She looked calm and focused. Across the room, Paul sat with Dennis again. Paul's face was tight. The confidence he once carried was almost gone. The judge entered, and the room became silent. This hearing was important. It was the moment when evidence would be fully reviewed. It was no longer about claims or threats. It was about facts. Dennis spoke first. He repeated the argument that the neighborhood group acted with good intention. He said the structure was part of long-term planning. He said Mark acted without warning and caused loss. As Dennis spoke, Helen wrote notes. She did not interrupt. She waited. When it was her turn, she stood slowly and spoke clearly. She began with ownership. She showed the official land records. She showed the boundary survey from Nora. The judge examined the documents carefully. Helen then presented the town office records. No permit. No application. No approval. Then she showed the emails. The room changed when the emails were read aloud. The messages showed urgency. They showed awareness of risk. They showed decision-making that ignored proper process. Dennis objected, saying the emails were misunderstood. The judge raised a hand and asked Dennis to sit. The judge asked Helen to continue. Helen explained how the group placed signs to suggest authority. She explained the false complaints filed with the town office. She explained the demand letters and the large sums with no proof. She finished by saying something simple. My client protected his property. The group attempted to take control where they had none. The judge leaned back and stayed silent for a moment. Then the judge spoke. The judge said the court saw no proof that the neighborhood group had authority over Mark's land. The judge said the lack of permits was serious. The judge also said the internal messages showed poor judgment. The judge dismissed the demand for millions. Mark felt his chest loosen. But the judge was not finished. The judge said the court would now review whether the neighborhood group acted improperly. This meant the case had shifted. Now the group had to explain itself. Paul's face turned pale. The judge ordered a full review of the group's actions and finances related to the project. The judge also warned that misuse of authority could lead to penalties. The hearing ended with clear instructions. Outside the courtroom, Mark stood quietly while Helen spoke to reporters. She kept it short and respectful. She said the facts spoke for themselves. Paul left through a different door. In the following weeks, the pressure moved away from Mark and onto the neighborhood group. Town officials began asking questions. They requested records. They asked about other projects. They reviewed past complaints. More people came forward. One landowner shared how the group tried to fine him for rules he never agreed to. Another shared how the group threatened to block access to a shared road. A small business owner said he was pressured to pay fees to avoid trouble. Mark listened to these stories with a mix of anger and sadness. He realized how easily fear could be used when people believed authority was absolute. Helen worked carefully with the town office. She shared what she could. She stayed within the law. But the pattern was becoming clear. Paul tried to contact Mark again. This time, the message was different. Paul asked to meet privately. He said he wanted to resolve things peacefully. Helen advised against it. If he wants to speak, he can do it through lawyers, she said. Paul then sent another message offering a full apology and withdrawal of all claims if Mark agreed not to pursue any further action. Mark read the message slowly. He thought about the weeks of stress, the rumors, the threats, the letters, the attempt to take his land. He told Helen he would not agree. "This is not just about me anymore," Mark said. "If they walk away without consequence, they will do it again." Helen nodded. "I understand," she said. Soon after, the town office announced an official review of the neighborhood group's status. This was rare. It meant the group's authority itself was under question. Paul's name appeared in reports. His business connections were examined. His role in managing funds was reviewed. The group stopped sending letters. The signs near Mark's land disappeared quietly one morning. The car across the road never returned. Months passed. The final court decision arrived on a quiet afternoon. Helen called Mark and asked him to come to her office. When Mark arrived, Helen smiled. The court ruled fully in Mark's favor. The neighborhood group was found to have acted outside its authority. Their claims were rejected. They were ordered to cover Mark's legal costs. The court also sent findings to the town office for further action. Mark sat back in the chair, breathing slowly. It was over. But the story did not end there. A few weeks later, the town made a public announcement. The neighborhood group lost its operating approval. Its finances were placed under review. New rules were introduced to protect landowners from similar actions. People in town began talking openly. They spoke about standing up, about asking questions, about not accepting pressure without proof. Mark returned to his land one evening as the sun set. The cleared ground was covered in grass now. Birds moved through the trees. The air felt calm again. Mark walked the boundary line one last time. Nothing had changed physically, but everything had changed in meaning. His land was no longer just a quiet place outside town. It had become a reminder that ownership mattered, that silence did not mean permission, that even organized power had limits. Mark stood still and looked out across the open space. For the first time in a long while, he felt fully at peace. And he knew one thing for sure. No one would ever try to take his land again. After the final court decision, Mark thought life would return to normal. For the first few days, it did. He woke up early, made tea, and walked his land like he always did. The trees were still. The ground was calm. The sky looked wide and open. Mark felt like he could breathe again. But peace has a strange way of bringing new questions. Mark started receiving calls from people he did not know. Some were landowners from nearby areas. Some were from the same neighborhood group that had caused him trouble. They asked him how he fought back. They asked what papers he used. They asked what they should do if they faced the same pressure. Mark did not enjoy attention, but he understood something important. What happened to him was not only about one illegal structure. It was about fear. It was about people being pushed until they gave up, because they thought they had no power. Mark decided he would not stay silent. Helen helped him write a simple public statement. It was short and clear. It explained that Mark owned the land, the structure had no permit, and the case was decided by facts. It also encouraged people to check their property documents and not sign anything without understanding it. Mark posted the statement on a local community page. The response was fast. People thanked him. People shared their stories. Some wrote that they had been threatened with fines. Some wrote that they were told they had to follow rules even when they never joined any group. Others said they paid money in the past just to avoid stress. Mark read every message. One name appeared again and again in the comments. Paul. Not as a victim. Not as someone misunderstood. People described him as a man who pushed hard, used strong words, and acted like rules were weapons. They said he always spoke politely, but the pressure behind his words was heavy. Mark felt a cold sense of truth. The case was over in court, but the damage in the community was still real. A week later, Mark received an email from the town office. They invited him to attend a public meeting about new local protections. They wanted landowners to speak about their experiences. Helen encouraged Mark to go. You do not have to fight anymore, she said. But your voice can help prevent this from happening again. Mark agreed. The meeting took place in a simple town hall room. Chairs were set in rows. A few officials sat at the front. Several residents came too. Some looked nervous. Some looked angry. Some looked tired. Mark stood when it was his turn. He did not speak with drama. He spoke with calm truth. He explained how he found the structure on his land. He explained how he checked the permits and found none. He explained how the group demanded money and tried to create pressure through rumors and complaints. He explained how facts and clear records helped him win. Then he said one sentence that stayed in the room like a quiet warning. If they can do it to one person, they can try it with anyone. The officials nodded. After Mark sat down, more people stood to speak. A woman named Sanaa said she was charged fees for rules she never accepted. A man named Imran said he was told his fence color was not allowed, even though he lived outside the neighborhood boundary. Another person said the group tried to force him into joining by claiming he had no choice. The stories were different, but the pattern was the same. Confusion, pressure, fear. The town officials took notes. They asked questions. They listened more carefully than before. After the meeting, one official spoke to Mark privately. He said the town planned to create a clear system that would stop groups from claiming authority without proof. He said they would require public registration for any group that collects fees or controls projects. He said they would also improve the permit checking system so no one could start building without landowner approval. Mark felt proud, not because he enjoyed winning, but because something good was coming out of a bad experience. But the story still had one more twist. 2 weeks later, Mark found a small envelope in his mailbox. There was no return address. Inside was a single note. It was short. It said, "You made us lose." Mark read it once and placed it on the table. He did not know who sent it, but he could guess the feeling behind it. Someone was angry. Helen told him to report it and keep it as evidence, just in case. Mark did so. That night, Mark installed better lights near his gate. He also placed a simple camera system facing the entrance. Not out of fear but out of wisdom. He understood that some people do not accept limits easily. The next month passed without problems. Then the town released a public update. Paul's private company was officially investigated for improper handling of funds connected to the neighborhood group. The group itself was reorganized under new leadership. Several old rules were removed. Fees were reviewed. Complaints were audited. Mark read the update slowly. He felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. He did not enjoy seeing people fall. But he also believed people should be held responsible when they use power wrongly. One evening, Mark drove to a small store near the edge of town. He wanted to buy supplies for his garden plan. As he walked out with bags in his hands, he saw a familiar figure near the parking lot. Paul. Paul looked different. His clothes were still clean, but his posture was weaker. He did not carry his folder. His face looked older. His eyes moved quickly, like he was checking if people were watching. Mark walked past him without stopping. Paul spoke softly. Mark. Mark stopped but did not turn fully. Paul said, "You did not have to take it that far." Mark answered in a calm voice, "You did not have to build on my land." Paul was quiet. Mark turned and looked at him. Paul's eyes showed frustration, but also something else. Regret. Mark said, "You tried to scare me. You tried to make me pay for your mistake. You spread rumors. You pushed people. That is why it went far." Paul's jaw tightened. He looked away. Mark did not insult him. He did not raise his voice. He simply said, "Next time, respect boundaries." Then Mark walked away. When Mark returned home, he stood on his porch and looked over his land. He thought about how simple his dream had been. Just quiet and space. No fights. No pressure. Life had changed that plan, but it also gave him something new. Confidence. Mark began building his small home project. He hired a real builder. He got real permits. He built slowly and carefully. He planted a garden with vegetables and flowers. He added a small shed for tools. Over time, the land became what he always wanted. A place where he could breathe. A place that belonged to him, not just on paper but in reality. Months later, Mark received a message from a young couple who owned land nearby. They wrote that Mark's story helped them stand up to pressure and protect their property. They thanked him. Mark smiled quietly when he read it. He did not need fame. He did not need attention. He only needed one thing: to know that when someone tried to cross a line, he had the strength to say no. And now the whole town understood that line too.